I always tell you that I have a great podcast coming up because I believe, in my opinion, that I always do have a great podcast coming up. But today, I truly have a great podcast coming up because I have a great guest today. And the thing that makes the podcast great are the guest, of course. I have Fatima Barnes. Do you know who she is? If not, you will find out today. She is the founder and owner of CEO Charm School. And the reason why she's here is because apparently I need some charm as a CEO. We're going to talk about personal brands today. We're going to talk about branding in general. I'm curious. I have questions. 30 seconds, and I'm going to bring Fatima up. Welcome to the Common Sense Show, and today I have Fatima Barnes with me. She is the founder and owner, as I mentioned before the intro, which always has people bobbing, typically, when they go through it, of CEO Charm School. So you tame CEOs, is that what you do?
Essentially, it's really more about them understanding what it really takes to be a CEO in a sense. I think it's very common for a lot of people to say, oh, I'm a CEO, and they really don't. They lack that kind of etiquette, those leadership skills, and those things to incorporate that into your business. So it's kind of because I really do like to I take business very seriously. Mm-hmm. So I like to kind of take that approach with any clients that I work with.
Okay. All right. And so tell me a little bit about you. What led you to branding? And what led you to want to even pursue helping people develop their personal brands?
Yes. It's been actually a long journey to actually get me to this point now, because I've actually helped more on the business branding side for years. Most of the time I've been on that side, but also have done a great deal of personal branding. And it was more of like the fun part that I would kind of keep on the side. Whereas my main focus was branding your business, branding a movement, branding something of that type. But I realized that there was a major disconnect and gap over my years of experience of just working with a lot of those owners and founders of businesses who really lacked that capacity to understand how important it is as well to also build a personal brand as well. So that kind of inspired that transition, because I initially, really branding was my favorite part of business as a whole when I would work with any business owner. And I just realized that's where my love was. And I realized that it was a major gap when I would talk to these amazing people who are industry disruptors. They have these stories to tell, this art, this thing behind the brand that drives what they do, and they don't talk about it enough, or they don't use it enough to their benefit.
It's funny because I own and run multiple businesses simultaneously. I wish they were all at the Elon Musk level of billion-dollar valuations, multiple billion-dollar valuations. We'll get there, people. But I did have a personal brand before this. Obviously, having this podcast is extremely helpful, and also writing my articles. Since I'm a writer for Forbes, is extremely helpful in my personal brand as well as a thought leader in the small business and entrepreneur space. Why is it important for the business to run through a personal brand, the lens of a personal brand versus it being kind of just separated, or should you have both? How do these two things reconcile in the marketplace?
That's a great question. So the way that I look at it is, there are some people who are like, I just want to be in the background, and that is what I want to do. And I want the business to be the main focus. And that's okay, right? I think that it's really also more specific to the industry that you decide to be in, right? If you're going to be someone who is a creative of any kind, or you are where they really need to be invested in you, right? You're the one that's going to be guiding them, leading them in some kind of way, or maybe it's your art. I feel the focus should be also on you as a personal brand. Not only that, because if you build your personal brand, even if you build it in conjunction to what you do as a business owner, you're building a brand whether you realize it or not. That's the biggest thing. I'm more about how do we put intention behind what you're doing to make sure that you are positioned in a way that it will benefit you, your businesses, and anything else that you do in the future. Right. So I feel with personal branding, even if you've never owned a Tesla, you know who Elon Musk is. Right. So it's really about whatever he does from that standpoint. He can do anything else. We're always going to know what else he has going on. We're in tune with that. That's just one example. There are so many other people who have personal brands that whatever they do, they have that tribe of people that's going to rally behind. Even if you pivot, you switch, whatever you decide to do, that brand is so strong. People will trust that I trust whatever else this person is going to create and bring out into the world. So I feel it's based on what is your personal goals for the mission that you have with what you're here to do. And I think that's what people don't talk enough about, is building it around you and what you actually want.
So I'm sure that you come up across people who speak when they speaking to you about, am I worthy to have a personal brand? I don't know that many people. People don't know me. Is that a concern? How do you help people reconcile that?
That is actually the most common thing that I hear, because when they think of building a personal brand, they do typically tend to think, well, I'm not a celebrity. I'm not an influencer. I don't have thousands or millions of followers. And that's actually not what it's about. When you are building an authentic brand and you're putting that out there into the world, it's really about how do you connect with your tribe of people. It's not about popularity or how to do all of these things. And I think when they don't realize that a brand is really just someone's perception of you or what you're putting out there. And so if you look at it from that perspective and understand that it's their experiences with you and how do you put intention and tailor that, then they start to break down and understand, because again, you're doing it whether you realize it or not. So there is a perception of you and what you have, your services, your businesses. Is already a perception that's out there. And so once I can explain to them that it's not about being perfect, it's not about being an influencer, it's not about being a celebrity, it's not about millions or thousands of followers, it's really about how you connect with those people who need what you have to offer. That is where the breakdown really kind of starts to begin, because we all are building brands. So it's not about being worthy or not.
So how do I know what I'm building is something that the general public wants? How do I gauge that?
Because it's not about the general public. I think that is, personally, this is my viewpoint on branding. I personally do not feel like your focus should just be on the general public per se. I think the focus should be on who you actually genuinely want to connect with in the public. And that is what your focus should be on. Because when you try to please and serve everybody through what you have, through your art, through your how you show up in the world, you are going to find yourself in a situation where with your brand and how you present yourself, you're going to be trying to put your hand in too many pots and try to serve too many people and try to please too many people. It's going to drive you crazy. But if you focus on not necessarily the general public, but who within the general public is the best fit to match your vibe and what you have to offer, that is where your focus should be, I feel, primarily, not necessarily the general public.
So how do we start?
And this is funny we were talking about this because I just talked about this on my live today. I say you start by showing up. You literally start by showing up. There is free platforms out here. You got YouTube, you got Instagram, you got TikTok. There are free platforms out here. Simply showing up is the first step. Simply showing up and being authentic and expressing your intention I feel is the first step to building that. That is where you start to those people who are going to vibe with that are going to be attracted to what you have. But I feel the biggest mistake is people fear this. I don't need to show up because I'm not good enough, or I don't have all of this. And in order for you to even get that, to attract those opportunities, to take it a step further, it simply starts by being willing to show up.
What does it mean to be authentic on social media to you? Because in some ways, being on social media is not authentic, because it is not, it's a microcosm of the world, and it's not even representative of everyone everywhere. So how do you become authentic on social media, given that it feels uncomfortable, right? It doesn't feel natural, right? Mm-hmm. Authenticity feels natural, but social media does not. How do you kind of reconcile those two things?
I'll tell you, for me personally, I feel like it's breaking down the fact that understanding that, yes, social media is kind of not a real place, right? But two, it's just being able to be clear about, one, what you're comfortable sharing on there. Mm-hmm. Two, knowing who you are off and online. I think that's really the key, because if I know myself, then you kind of get off of the comparison train. You kind of can be focused when you are on those platforms. Three, it's about really just you being honest about who you are, your intentions, and what you do. I think the biggest mistake people make is trying to portray themselves as someone they're not. And I think they also think that authenticity is sharing all their business, telling all their personal business. And that's also not necessarily required to be authentic. I think it's really just about being honest and transparent about your intentions on that platform, and being who you are and being honest about that, and having integrity about that, and being focused on that lane. And that can be difficult to do because there's so many things out there. But I feel like if you are showing up in that way, that will separate you from all the other people out there that's not being honest, and people can tell.
What are the people who are successful at business doing right? I'm sorry, not business, personal branding doing right. Mm-hmm. And what are the people who are bad at personal branding doing wrong that you've seen?
I will use myself as an example, as I've been on both sides of it. Okay. I was doing it wrong at one point in time. And that was because I was showing up in a way that really was this corporate background that I have. That was this, I'm going to code switch. I'm going to be perfect. I don't want to make any mistakes. I am going to speak in a way, even if it doesn't feel real to me. I'm going to do marketing strategies, even though they don't really feel aligned with who I really am, because I need to make sure that I get the clients. So I'm going to show up prim, proper, polished, clean. I'm going to speak in a way that's not really natural to me, because I don't want to, not get the clients or not get what I need out of it. And that was—
Is it because you thought that the clients were judging you based off of what you were speaking initially?
Yeah,
how you were speaking?
That, because I come from a corporate background, right? I spent a lot of time in corporate, and especially as a Black woman in corporate, it was, show up a certain way. Never let them see this other side of you. Never show up in this way so that they think that you are not capable, not competent. So always use a certain tone, speak a certain way, the customer service voice, be that. So
where did that come from?
It's conditioning throughout really my entire life, especially entering into the corporate space. Even when you get into the corporate space, you're automatically, by the other people who are there that are older, that are like, don't do this, you got to do this. If you want to get here, you got to be this way. And so it was ingrained in me so deeply, I didn't even realize that I was being told that. And that's also just culturally and society as well. It's like, no, be comfortable for people who don't look. You need to do whatever you need to do to make yourself appealing and be comfortable, and make those people comfortable in how you show up. Mm-hmm. And that conditioning that I had in corporate America is what followed me when I decided to step out into this online world and into this online space as a brand or as a coach at the time, or however I decided to show up, that followed me. And that was me doing it wrong. It was me not using my true voice. It was me not wanting to rock the boat. Don't say the thing. Don't say, that was me doing it wrong. And I see a lot of people who I feel that does that.
Now, when you came out of school, like out of university, you went right into corporate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when you went into corporate, there wasn't a period of time where you, like you do now, work for yourself.
I worked for myself when I was in corporate, yes, like on the side, but I have been working for myself full time for the last 4 years. Mm-hmm.
And so I see what you're saying. So you never really kind of had, so like if you had, for instance, started on your own prior to going to corporate, then you might feel slightly differently than going right from university to corporate. And then that's kind of what you learned when you were there is the only thing that you knew at the time.
Yes. Exactly. And coming from an HBCU more specifically, we are taught, it's this ingrained, and again, whether I agree with it or not, but at the time, going to an HBCU, coming out, it's like, you got to be twice as hard. You got to work twice as hard. You got to be twice as good. You got to be extra perfect. You got to be above reproach. You can't mess up. So the conditioning is deep in that regard. For me, it's like, okay, I walked in knowing even in corporate, I got to be the best at what I got to do. I got to show up in this way. That's what I have to do in order to really survive. If you look at it, in my mind, it was literally survival. So coming out of that,
so you paid tuition for them to tell you that when you were going before you went to that. So this is, in my opinion, why partly the college university model is broken. It's just because they give you so much bad information out there. And is there usefulness to showing up, like what people call showing up? And when we say showing up, what we mean is presenting yourself in front of other people, right? Is there usefulness in creating and having professionalism to a certain degree? The answer is obviously yes, because people need to be able to receive what you're saying. Right. But what you're fundamentally talking about is shifting. Like essentially you're becoming a whole nother person while you're at work, and then 5 o'clock the bell tolls, you leave, and then becoming a whole nother person when you get back home, right?
Yeah It's a mask that I wore and that many people still wear the moment they decide I want to show up as someone in these online spaces. At the moment you decide, because before then on social media, I posted whatever. I didn't think much about it. I got off. It was just whatever. It was something.
Give me an example of your post when you were before this. You butterflied.
Social media since a freshman in college. So
it looked like a hostage video. Is that what you say?
No, it's just I guess I just really didn't care what I said, whether it was politics or, I didn't really care. It wasn't that important to me in that sense. It was just, I would share and not think that deep into it.
Right.
The moment that I decided, okay, I'm going to use this platform to further a brand, a mission that I have to help people in their businesses or whatever. Even when I was a business owner before I did it full time as a coach, but when I was, I had a hair brand before, I would still feel like, oh, I got to be careful now what I say or what I post because the brand and the business, and I don't want to. And I think to a certain degree, you shouldn't be out there just talking crazy and reckless in the name of branding, right? And being authentic. I think that it's a fine line between that, because some people take authenticity for really being rude, blunt, and I'm being polarizing. I don't agree with that either. I don't necessarily agree with that either.
And in some ways, that's playing a character too, right? It's not really being who you are. I mean, I am a very blunt guy. It's just my personality. And you can probably generally tell that I'm very straightforward if you talk to me for a period of time. Typically, people who are very straightforward have more of a, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but they have this kind of full intensity with their voice where everything seems it almost seems like sounds terrible, but like a hammer, right? When they talk, it's they're very sure of what they're saying. And so so I kind of that's kind of generally my personality, but I get what you're saying, but I've always been kind of combined that with I've always been the kind of person that has been like kind of more attracted to people and friendships or whatever, like that have this ability to just be themselves regardless of what their personality is. I think that you're right, it does play, and it comes in as authentic. If you are a person who values honesty and truthfulness over everything else. And so sometimes, like, it's funny because I'll be on social media, on YouTube. I have this YouTube channel and the podcast, and I will still, after all this time, be slightly uncomfortable to say something to the audience. But the truth is so much more important in what I'm going to say than how comfortable I am at times in saying it. And so you just say it, and then it's just like, I'll say something like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but that I don't really want to say it, but I'm saying it because I value getting it out there in general. But you're right. People endear themselves to people who they feel are natural, which is why extemporaneous speech, when you're giving a presentation, or if you're a politician, right? Like speaking extemporaneous, coming away off of that kind of teleprompter, right, is going to endear you to the crowd and how people kind of want to receive what you're saying.
Absolutely. And you are exactly kind of saying what I really feel is important, how you're like, I'm uncomfortable with saying this, but I need to speak the truth. I think that is important in authenticity. But I do feel some people to the other side of it where they are just rocking the boat and saying things I need to get a reaction out of people. It's almost like a trolling mentality. I don't agree with that either, because now you're just playing into it as well, but just in a different way, because you're probably not really like that. But you've been told in order for you to get the reaction that you need to get out of people, then that's how you need to be. Or in your case, how you're saying you're normally and naturally just a blunt person, and it just comes across a certain way, but that's just who you are, and you have no harm in that. It doesn't offend me. So, but for someone else, like if you were to try to be completely opposite of that.
So I try to be blunt but not rude, right?
Right.
There's no reason that we should leave people without dignity, but at the same time, they deserve to know the truth.
Exactly.
But what I'm not going to do, I tend to also stay away from how I personally feel about certain things, because that's also not usually helpful. Because it doesn't come off as like a thoughtful narrative of what you're trying to say. Right. It's just, if I'm going to say something and it makes people uncomfortable, no matter who it is, including people who are closely tied to me, then it just kind of is what it is.
Right.
But sometimes you need to brush your teeth. You forgot to brush your teeth this morning. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yes. I think that's authenticity. I think you are a great example of that. A great example of what that looks like, I don't have to be rude in order to speak the truth. And I do think that there's a level of, they've been taught I see this all the time when people talk about branding for people who are the face of things like you are for the podcast, or coaches, consultants. It's like, you have to be a thought leader. You have to share your perspective. But I think that in doing that, and this teaching of be polarizing, when you do that, they end up teaching you to veer on the side of mean, just rude for no reason, and then talking to people as if they're not an adult, and instead of leading them to come up with their own conclusion as to how they feel about this, stating the facts. Yes, sharing your perspective, because I do feel like sharing your perspective from a place of, this is how I feel about this in this regard and how it impacts you. I think that's important to show that I do have a thought process, but it's also okay not to speak on things that you are not well informed on as well. And just speaking on things to be polarizing and rock the boat, or telling people what they should do in a way that's rude in the name of being authentic, is actually working against people as well. So where I come in at is, I like to help people find, like, what is those things about yourself? Because usually it works for them, and they're trying to change it. They're trying to hide it. They're like, instead of just being like, this is just how I am, They're trying to change it and hide it and be someone they're not because they're afraid that in this online space, and we've already said it's not even real to begin with, it's not necessary for you to do that.
I find that you find more authenticity now in the podcast space than you do obviously in the kind of like the legacy media with their guests. They're all I feel like the legacy media now all kind of goes for clips. So their personality is like clip based, and you can kind of tell because everyone's trying to win on a punchline like some comedian instead of just talking like a normal person. The issue is now is that the climate is so polarizing that moderate statements don't get airtime because most people are moderate. They're not like extreme on any issue. And I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about
everything.
Like child rearing, whatever the case is, most people are moderate when it comes to this stuff, right? But they don't get the sound bites. How do you structure your personal brand? How does a person come up with a personal brand that stands for something? Does it need to stand for something, or does it just have to represent them? How should they think about that?
That's a good question. And it's crazy that you say that as well, because my husband and I were just talking about that, even from a political standpoint, that most people are in the middle.
Of course,
but the people who get all the people who are the loudest are way on this side or way on that side.
Oh my God, they're so annoying. Yeah.
So yes, it's so annoying. So it's like, if you speak in the middle, you're right. When it comes to what's sensationalized, that is really not going to get that from a clip standpoint, but on podcasts and things like that, which I enjoy listening to, that's where I actually find my people like, okay, yes, I can get with this conversation.
Like the Common Sense Show, for instance.
Yes, like this show, for instance. But to your point, I feel that if you're just putting it out there as to like who you are, I do feel like maybe it's more effective to attach your mission behind it. Or you never know. Actually, I take that back. I can share a different perspective. Simply you just showing up and just being who you are online, you also never know where that may take you as well, even if you're not being intentional about it. You can use people like Tabitha Brown, for instance. She literally just went on social media, shared her thoughts on something. It went viral. She was being herself, not thinking about it, and her life completely took off. I think if you're ready to, though, that's not as common for everybody, being viral enough for it to have that kind of impact instead of that short 15 minutes of fame. I think it really comes from, even though she went viral off of this, she was still very intentional in all of the things that she was doing and how she was showing up. She was showing up with a goal in mind. She was showing up with, I want to inspire the people, talk to the people, share my journey as a vegan, as a good example of personal brand we were talking about earlier. But just her sharing the things that she loved, just talking about it, she had some type of intention behind what she was doing. She was thinking about a certain audience in mind, which is important. She was showing up in a way, just thinking about them, and it took off. So I personally feel if you are doing it with some kind of intention behind it in terms of this is the art, or this is how I feel, or this is just my mission for a certain group of people, I feel that it works out a lot better, because if you do have that viral moment, then it's more beneficial from a branding standpoint. Then those brand deals will come in and say, hey, like she has all the vegan products now in the stores and all of that, because that was kind of her intention behind it. So you can never go wrong with thinking about how you show up in a way from an intentional standpoint of this is kind of where my passion or my thoughts lie.
You know how you can tell if someone's a vegan?
How?
They tell you.
No, they're gonna let you know. They're gonna let you know that they are vegan. That is true. It's like a life. It's a whole movement, and it is.
Oh God, those vegans, they'll kill you. I don't know who Tabitha Brown is. Let me look.
Really? You'll probably know her if you see her, though.
I am totally not plugged into like the machine. So here's who. If you all don't know, maybe y'all, if you're watching this, you do know who Tabitha Brown is. I'm gonna show you all a picture, just so that we're all on the same page. Yes. And I hope I didn't pick up like the wrong one. You'll tell me. So.
I'll tell you.
All
She's
right.
a great example. A really great.
Is this her right here?
Yes. Yes, she is a great
Okay.
example of someone who I feel has a very strong, authentic personal brand, just
Right.
literally being herself and how it benefited her in so many ways simply by showing up as herself on the platforms, not trying to be anybody else, not
Hmm.
trying to just herself, and it worked. It
And
was
so she has like her own hair care line, like her a
mhm,
recipe books. She's
yeah.
in Target. So
Mhm.
her hair care line is in Target and stuff like that.
Yes,
Okay.
and it makes sense for her brand because everybody loved her natural hair,
Right.
and everybody loved her vegan recipes and the things that she would talk. It's how it's her energy as well. Like it shows through how she was showing up, and that is what really made it work for her.
So she truly like enjoys the vegan life kind of
Yes,
deal. Yeah.
yeah, not faking it because we
Oh
know.
God.
I know someone who was online
The
saying how
group.
they are vegan and it is their life, and I promise you, they were at a family event sneaking a rib. I'm just saying.
Uh
So
oh. All right. We want birthdays and we want names. Who is this person sneaking a rib?
they're not like huge, but it's just the
Okay.
fact of the matter
All right.
is, like, even if you're showing up in that space, but
Yeah.
really you're like, oh man,
If we're being honest, ribs are hard to turn down, even if you are vegan.
they
Like you
are.
could be on this vegan journey, and then you go. Like I went to Dallas to give a talk, give a
Mhm.
presentation to business owners, and I ate the best ribs I had ever had in my life. And if those ribs were put in front of me,
I want to fold every time.
oh,
Every
I
time
will fold.
I'm
I'm not
folding.
a vegan. I don't endorse that kind of behavior, but some people, some people do,
Yeah,
and it's fine. I don't care. But
right.
it works for them. I think that's kind of what you're saying. Is if it works for you, you should
It
put it out
works.
there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't go against what feels natural to you. A lot of times, what makes your brand, your personal brand, the strongest is playing on those things that are natural to you. Like I talk about how I have ADHD, it's just who
Hmm.
I am. So sometimes my thoughts may go here to here, but it works for me in that
Yeah.
regard. That's just who I am.
Growing up, like my friends used to always say, Mike, you're a jerk, just because I would just like, they would call me a jerk, but it's because I would say something that they were already thinking, and it was so obvious. It's like what I'm talking about with vegans and how most people don't like them, but they like themselves. And it's like I say stuff like this, and it kind of irritates some people and stuff like that. But it's not. I'm
It's just
just
who you are.
identifying what I see right in front of me, right? Um,
Right.
but no, I think it's hilarious. So tell me about this. You are writing your first book. Is it complete?
Yes. No, it's not complete. It releases June 1st, 2025.
Okay, June
I
1st. And it's called
Yes,
Homecoming, A Journey to Your True Self. That's an interesting title.
changed a little bit since I wrote that, but yes, I changed the title.
Okay. Can you tell us what the title is going to
Yes,
be?
I will. It's actually called Homecoming: Confessions of
Uh-huh.
an Ex People Pleaser.
Oh, are
So
you were a people pleaser?
I really was, and I did it in ways that I did not think or realize was people pleasing.
Like, give me
Part
an
of that
example.
was showing up online in that way. That's one example that is people pleasing, and you don't even realize that you're people pleasing.
Did you
And
did you write? Did you read the comments? Were you a
yeah,
comment reader?
yeah.
What did
I struggled with comment, even if it wasn't about me. I struggle with what are the comments saying about this? What are they saying about that? Yeah, I
what
used to
effect did that have on you?
ugh, my mental health. Like it's literally why I had to stop following like blogs, just unnecessary blogs and stuff, because I would go to the comments like, and if
Mm.
it was something that was triggering, I would still look at the comments. It's triggering to me, and I'm reading the comments, just adding insult to injury as it is. And so
Yeah.
that kind of shifted even my relationship with social media. I had to learn to be like, listen, this is not real. You being who you are, like if it's triggering you, okay, you need to go within yourself and figure out what
Hmm.
that is, and don't make it about social media within itself. Make it about you and taking that trigger and working through that. So yes, I was a comment reader, but I was a people pleaser in so many ways, but it showed up very differently for me because I did not realize in my as a curse breaker, because a part of it is like for the curse breakers, the perfectionists, these the people in that regard, where we're trying to be who society has told us to be and who has deemed what we deem successful, and how that is also a form of people pleasing. Because for me,
what's a curse breaker?
Someone who is usually the first in their family, or the first for sure in several generations, to say, I am going to do things differently. I am not going to raise my children the way that you guys have raised your children. I am going to, for me, even just going to college, for me, even just doing a lot of the things that I accomplished was my way of breaking generational curses in my family.
Oh, it's when you do something that your family has. Well, you're the first to do something that your family hasn't done. I see. Okay.
Exactly. So,
and so, do you come from people pleasers in your family?
Do I come from people pleasers?
Yeah, like people in your family, like people pleasers, like your mom or your grandma.
I would say yes. I would say, in a way, because they are afraid to break the status quo of what's considered normal and what's considered normal for that family dynamic. I would say that they are people pleasers. And it shows up differently for them. It shows up with them as, I am afraid of doing this. For me, my people pleasing looked like, okay, I did these things. I went to college. I was the first. I pursued entrepreneurship. I was the first. My background is really set up. I was supposed to be a statistic. My father has been incarcerated my entire life. I wasn't necessarily raised by my mother. So it's a lot of the background that I come from, poverty, things like that. What was normal for them is to kind of stay in that energy, in that vibration, and that's how they please the family and the status quo. For me, I took a different route, but I became the person that they felt like, okay, well, you've made it now. So now you need to be the family ATM. Now you need to solve all the family's problems. Now you need to, because you doing these things, you've made it. So now you owe us for what you've done. And I would give really pleasing out of, okay, I felt guilty, this need to be validated. It was all a part of people pleasing, because all of the things I was accomplishing was about, how can I be deemed worthy by society and by those around me, and how can I prove my worth through my wealth or my material things, or how many degrees I can get and how many accolades I can earn. And so I had to go through a breakdown of breaking down those things within myself, and really just coming back to who I am and who I am, without feeling like I need to please others. So if I want something now, it's about me. Do I truly want this? Am I truly pursuing this because this feels good to me, or is it about proving something to someone else?
So you kind of started running your thought process through a different machine, to try to come out with a different outcome.
Yes.
And what was that like in terms of, when did you have your first kind of, you know what, I'm giving a little bit too much here. I can dial this back a little bit, or I can change the conversation. When did you have your first kind of break?
All my life. I'll tell you, even in the book, I talk about this. It probably starts as early as 4 for me, because I did not know that. I don't even know where it came from within me, when all I saw was poverty. And at that time in my life, right? My grandmother was raising me. She was earning $4 an hour. She was on food stamps. She did the best that she could in that regard. But that I was raised in the hood and right across the street from the project. So everybody was on some type of assistance. But even for me, I remember going to the store and being ashamed to hand over some food stamps for my snacks. And
at 4 years old?
Yeah. As young, like early, as long as I can remember, I remember being ashamed. I don't know where that shame came from, but everybody else around me was on assistance. So I don't know where the shame came from. But
so you would take the food stamp and you would hand it to like the cashier. Like they would hand it to you, and then you internally you felt shame for that.
I did early in my life. Like I was 4 and I told my grandmother, like, I'm going to be rich. I'm not going to be living like this. And she would be like, where does this girl get this stuff from? Like,
interesting.
I just always inherently knew that living in poverty and living this way, although I didn't have like a terrible childhood in that regard.
Right.
But it was just something for me, and it showed up into my adult life with me never wanting to look poor, feel poor, be associated with poor. I just never, like, it was something in me that said, I can't do this. And
what did that change? How did that change how you spoke and acted with other people?
People pleased. I never treated anybody who was in that, because I came from that. Like, it was never like a look down type of thing. It was always just a like, that's just not what I want for me mentality. And in turn, I people please because I did feel like, for those who still had that mentality, that I owed them something because I was able to break free from quote unquote poverty. My mindset was still into poverty because I still felt that tie, though, to how do I become this almost savior complex I developed. Like, everybody's coming to me and they know she's going to give, but even to my own detriment. So it was definitely a form of people pleasing, but also seeking validation of, I have to prove that I'm worth. So the way that I dealt with people was through honestly, my money became a mask in that regard. Like, I was the friend who would go out, we would go out and I got the bill kind of thing, and then people started to become to expect that out of me. Like, oh, she's got it. She's going
wouldn't
to
even reach for the wallet.
Yes. Like, oh, well, she's, then it's people now asking you that they want their rent paid. Like, they got to pay their rent. They're short on rent. It was always a sob story. It was always this and that. And it became too much. And I was just like, oh no, like, this can't. When I started therapy, it kind of started breaking down those things. It was like, yeah, no, I got to say, no, I can't do this anymore. Like, people aren't even paying me. They're looking at what I can do.
And initially your personal brand was kind of tied closely with that presentation of what you just described.
Yes, exactly.
And how was it coming off to the audience, do you think? What were they seeing?
I feel there was a group of people that was, yes, inspired by, this is a Black girl who's traveling the world, who has this nice house with a pool, who has this, who has that. And they were inspired, but I feel like I attracted people with that mask, and it attracted the wrong people who were drawn to me for those reasons, as opposed to who I actually am as a person and how I actually think and how I actually feel. And so even in the clients that I would get, they would see those things. They would see this mask of, I wasn't ever doing it to be flashy in a sense. It was just like, that's just who I was, but it was still my mask that I wore. And
so you were attracting people that you were also enabling.
Yes. It's like, they felt like, if you did that, I'm depending on you to lead me to that as well. Like, I'm depending on you to, and if I don't see it show up in my life in the way that it looks in yours, now it's a problem. And it's like, but you don't understand the mental break, what I've actually went through to get to that point in life. And that's kind of the point, right? But it was more so that it would attract people and they would see that mask. And then on top of that, I'm already like showing this corporate, mask. And so they would get into the programs, and then it's like the real me. Like, we're going to talk about your business, but we're going to get down to business. Like, and it was like, whoa. This isn't what I ordered, right? Like, I thought this was going to be all about like how I can see money right away, because I want my house like yours, right away. And I learned very quickly that I got to break that down. I can't lead with that in terms of, I didn't even know that I was leading with it, but because it was such a mask that I had worn my whole life, that's how I showed up as well in an online space. And I thought I was being authentic, but I really wasn't.
And so you decided to kind of renovate your brand, and you started putting out new content. What was the new content about? Like, what was the switch?
The switch was in me realizing that me just simply speaking to what the right people that I want to connect with. Like I had to get very clear on who those people were, who I did not want to have attracted to my brand in any way. I had to get clear about that. Very, very clear. I knew what I did not want anymore. So once I realized like the people who I'm actually trying to attract have these certain traits, attributes, these kind of desires, these kind of experiences, that was really where it started for me. And then I started to say, those are my people. And I can be who I am with those people. And I can share my knowledge, my expertise in a way that is going to resonate with those people, just simply being myself. I don't have to wear this mask in a sense of using that at the forefront of how I would attract people. So I started to work on myself and say that, you know, it's okay if it's not perfect, if I'm not perfect. It's okay if this is what I think. Like you said, to your point, like you haven't brushed your teeth today. This is the truth. This is the truth, right? It needs to be said. But the people that I now attract and that I want to attract, they appreciate that. Like they're okay with that. And I started to make that very clear.
Right.
Who I wanted to show up for, and this is why I'm showing up in that way. It's just me being myself, but in a way that says I will attract those people as opposed to the other people that aren't ideal.
So I kind of took you all the way around because I wanted to show a roadmap of what, if a person's thinking about a personal brand, the work that they need to put in to make their personal brand obviously work, you know? And so for me, like, you know, it was kind of, it wasn't similar at all because I'm definitely not a people pleaser. My favorite two letters of the alphabet are N and O.
I love that.
And so, no, but for me, like, it was kind of understanding, do I have something to say? Here I am, this guy who's run businesses for over 2 decades. I just sold one of my companies last year. I've coached people. I've worked with professional athletes. I traveled the world. I've spoken on stages across the country. And I still didn't think I had something to contribute to the conversation, not because I didn't think I was smart. I know what my IQ is. It's because I didn't think I had something to add. And so why would I think I don't have something to add? And, you know, it's probably because I had never organized my thoughts in my head. And so for me, it was just that, right? It's like, man, what do I talk about? I guess the answer to that question is I talk about whatever I friggin' want to talk about. Right. I just have to organize it first. And my thoughts weren't organized. You talked about how you kind of had this process where you thought about who you were talking to and thought about yourself. And you had this kind of epiphany about kind of who you are as a person. And then you kind of switched it. And then you started holding in. And then I think for someone with probably the opposite personality as you, I had to think about kind of what do I want to say that actually moves the needle forward and who do I want to talk to? And when I started doing that, I started writing about that, you know, kind of like post-sale of the company. I had to think about kind of what I wanted to do. I was already also working as a CEO for another company. And I started writing. And then all of a sudden I just got called. Forbes reached out to me. Wow. They're like, we've been monitoring your stuff and we think that you would make a great addition to our team. And then they hired me to be a writer. That's how I got the role. And, but it was because I was able to organize my thoughts in a way that I thought was succinct, clear, and efficacious for my audience. You know, I do use words like efficacious on a regular basis. It's not just for this podcast. People always say, I don't know what that means. I have to look it up. It's just, I think that it's, you're right, important, no matter if your personalities are similar to yours or opposite, that you do have to find it because you're not going to have anything to say if you don't, because everything else that you say is just going to be talking points or a repetition of like almost like a incantation of something that is a talking point from like a political party or a news source or other people. When that happens, and this is the biggest fear I think I have, which is I can take you out and put somebody else in who has the same talking points, and you don't matter. What matters is the talking point. You don't matter as a person because you don't really add anything, right? You're mediocre. You're just a cog. You don't have any specific insight. So, you know, when I think about personal branding myself, I think it's you, even if you are in an industry or presenting something to the public that has existed for centuries as a business, or just the business was just invented 20 years ago. If you bring something slightly different and you have a different take on it, don't be embarrassed to have a slightly different take on something that's already existing, because sometimes that can help educate people who think similarly to you. That seems like a better usage of our mental space and our thoughts. What do you think about that?
That you are exactly right and on point. And that is exactly why when I teach messaging and organizing your messaging in a way, that is exactly the approach that I take. Because like you said, we're all just we've all learned from something else. We've all learned something. There's really not much new to have been learned or discovered about certain concepts. So we're all just speaking from, in order for you to be different as a personal brand, it's really how are you adding you into that, your perspective, your thoughts, but those things about you that are different, that even if they pulled someone else, it's not going to be the same. Like everybody has those things that are different about them. And that's kind of what I believe in pulling out of anybody that I work with, the client. It's like, what are those things? Because if not, you're just going to be simply replaceable. It's really about that. That's exactly how I believe it. That's how I approach it. And I think that's why it's important to do that and do it in your way. I've always admired people like you, and there are other people out there who are just like, this is just what it is, right? Like, this is me. This is just how I approach it. This is how I take it. You can't be afraid to share that other perspective. And I know for me, that was kind of the issue when I first started to show up online. Is like, well, I think this way about it, but if I say the thing, it's going to be a problem. And now it's like,
oh God,
say the thing, right? And it's really about, I had to ask myself, well, what is the worst that could happen if I say the thing?
Yeah, people disagree, or they say that you should die. Whatever, I don't know. Like they,
but what, you can't change it. No, you're not going to change it. You're not going to change them. So that's exactly how I approach it, and I agree with you on that.
You know, one of the things I used to tell my employees all the time, like if they were trying to sell something, or if they were trying to ask for the sale, I would tell them people are going to say yes, no, maybe, or kill yourself. And like, you know, if you expect that going in, then you're not going to be surprised when they give you one of those four answers. It's the same thing online. Like I gave, so when the $20 minimum wage passed in California, which I personally think is for the fast food workers, which I think is silly. It's a stupid regulation. So people disagree with me. That's fine. And that's important. They should. And I explain why. I had this whole video. I gave a brief economics 101 about what happens when you put price controls in, price floors, price ceilings, stuff like that, and how it affects things, short-term, long-term. And, you know, I had some comments, and I kind of don't like even my own comment section sometimes. I just kind of let it go. But I got a ton of comments on this video. It was one of my biggest videos I've had. I mean, podcast shows I have a show, so I just do the show. And, you know, one guy was just like, your economics are terrible. I'm like, okay, but this is economics 101. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is not me inventing price controls. There's a definition for price control. There's a definition for price ceiling and price floor. I'm just telling you what it is. You can disagree with the book. It's your prerogative, but it is what it is. And you're right. Sometimes you can say something so plainly and the person will still disagree with you. What are you going to do? It's like, okay. And it's that personal strength. I think as you're building a personal brand, the ability to be wrong, if you're wrong about something. But I think so much now people they've kind of taken subjectivity and they put hard and fast binary rules about yes, no, answers to things that are subjective. And like, if you believe differently, then you're evil. If you believe the same, then you're an angel. You're a good person. Like, we separate people into good and bad now. It's like this, the last like 8, like we've always done it, but like even more so since like 2012, like we've been like telling people they're bad or good based off of what they eat, you know?
It's just everything. Everything has to be a thing. It's like everything's not a thing. Everything doesn't have to be argued when it's a subjective point.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's subjective. The point is that there's going to be enough, buffer in between where,
Right.
like you're not going to necessarily be able to decide about it. Okay, it is time for us to look at some TikToks, because what would the world be without stupid TikToks that we can learn from? So what I did was I pulled up 4 TikToks.
Okay.
I always do this most shows, and typically the topic is related to the why the person's coming on the show, and so in this case, personal branding. So we're gonna take a look at 4 personal branding TikToks, and you're gonna tell me what you think about them.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lead you in any way. Okay. I haven't seen these. You haven't seen these TikToks.
Okay.
Right?
I probably haven't. More than likely.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. You can tell me. And then yeah. And then we'll just get your thoughts on it, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect.
All right. Let's see. Let me share my screen. Yes, got it.
The whole point of building a strong personal brand is to get in touch with yourself, to have high self-awareness and self-acceptance, and to say like, hey, this is the way it's going to be. I can sit here and wish all day and night my hair is going to grow back. It's not, and it's okay, and I'm cool with it. I know what my limitations are. I know what my zone of genius is, and I'm not going to oversell my shortcomings and undersell my genius. I'm going to celebrate both. I'm really good at a couple of things. I'm terrible at lots of things, and that's all of me. But if you were to invest time, money, and energy towards something, go figure out who you are. Like, heal, learn to love thyself, and then hold up your freaking iPhone with crappy audio and video and just start talking to the camera. That's going to be the best brand possible. You may not become an overnight sensation. You might not become the Sam guy. Who cares? The whole point is not to chase those numbers. The whole point is to just fall in love with who you are. You'll be much more attractive.
Okay, your thoughts?
I agree 1,000% with everything.
1,000 is a lot. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with everything that he has said, and that's essentially kind of what I feel is foundational to understand that keeps you showing up more so authentically. Because if you know yourself, you love yourself, you know what triggers you, you know those things about yourself. When you show up in that space and you have a million comments of people telling you to die, you're okay with that, because you know yourself within, and I think that's so super important. He
nice,
nailed it.
TikTok approved. So you've officially endorsed a TikTok, and you can't back out of that now because it's public record.
I can't back out. I still stand by it though.
If I had to build a personal brand from scratch, I would focus my efforts on creating video content and posting on social media, I kid you not, 4 times a day. Every single channel out there. I don't care if it only gets 10 views. Here's why. 1, I can repurpose the content. 2, people build better emotional connections with others when they see and interact with them through video-based content versus audio or only text. I would then take the video content and then repurpose it and create blog content from it and even podcasts from it. But I would start with video content. You probably won't get as much engagement as you like at the beginning, but if you start doing collaborations with other people on these social platforms, you'll notice that over time, you'll get more followers, they'll get more followers. Within a year, you'll start having somewhat of a personal brand. Within 3 to 4 years, your personal brand will really start exploding. If you focus on a niche, you'll do much better, and then over time, you can expand that niche.
All right. What do you think about Neil Patel's advice when it comes to building a personal brand? 3 to 4 years. So I ain't got that kind of time, mama.
While I agree with how effective video content is, I do not agree with much of what he said as in turn of you need to be on all these platforms. This will get you these many followers and this and this and that. I think that is really a backwards approach to take to personal branding. 1, like you said, people don't have that kind of time. 2, having a strong personal brand has nothing to do with how many followers you have, how many videos, how many platforms you can be in. 3, I personally feel like when you're building a personal brand and you want to make sure that you can show up in the way that is authentic to you, I think you need to do it in a way that feels like home and connects with whoever it connects with. For some people, that is more of the written word than video. There are people who have platforms where they're mostly writing. You hardly ever see them maybe show up video-wise. They do, but they still can connect with people through words because maybe that's where their gift is. I think that it needs to be, because what happens is you tell that to that person who only has 100 followers, but they have a big mission and a strong purpose behind them. And you tell them, well, I need you to now go and start creating these videos and then repurposing them and then turn into and they may not even be ready for that. And that may not even make sense to them or for them. And that may not even work for them and who they are. And so now they're going to be spreading themselves thin for advice that may not be a fit for where they are in their journey and the goal that they have individually. And I think that's what keeps people in that cycle of like, well, I don't need to do a personal brand because I have to do all of these things and I don't have all of these followers. Whereas the first guy was kind of like, I mean, just show up, even if it's crappy audio, if that's all you got right now, just show up with what you have and detach from the outcome is a better approach to it than the second guy who was like, you want these followers, you want to get this, you want to get that. It's more of that chasing kind of thing.
So you saw it as more of a expectations based, because the kind of second guy, I could tell from your reaction that you're kind of like, you felt it was kind of taking you back to when you started having these expectations of yourself versus who you feel like you truly are, how you represent yourself now. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, all right. That's why we do these reactions, people. All right, here's the next one.
Something I've been doing for the past year or so on every single one of my videos is put a hashtag with my first and last name. Now, the reason why, it's not for vanity. It's simply because I'm building my personal brand, building that cachet, that portfolio of videos of my work. I don't know, 10 years from now, maybe somebody decides to click on the hashtag with my name and there's thousands of videos of all my work over the years. Who knows, man? I'm just building that personal brand. This internet stuff is new for everybody, especially something like TikTok. So why not just try stuff?
All right. Just try stuff.
I can agree with that to an extent. I'm kind of in the middle. I do think if you start to use your own branded hashtag, it can only help in the future, right? I do think just trying stuff can help, but I think it can also lead to like detriment. It can lead you to not knowing in between, like for instance, the first two guys, like it can lead you to not knowing which place you're like, I'm going to try this because he said this and I'm going to try this. And I think if you kind of stick to more focusing on, I'm going to try things, but it's more rooted in how I feel is aligned to me versus just trying random things and trying to see what works, because now you're taking that intent, you're putting your intention behind it again is just, I'm going to try stuff to try to get this particular outcome versus I'm just going to put it out there. Yes, I'm going to try things, but the intention is really for me to connect more so than to attach to a certain outcome. So I'm a little in the middle, because when you say that, it can be a little bit confusing for people. They start to think, well, I'm going to try everything now, or I'm going to try what this person says and that person says. And they're trying to build a brand. And again, it's a fine line between showing up authentically and just being who you are and just sharing that with the world versus I'm going to try stuff for the sake of an outcome.
Yeah. The second guy, the last guy was kind of like, he was a little bit more, I think, unpolished than the first two, which is why his advice kind of seemed a little simple, which is, hashtag your name. It's like, all right, I need a little bit more than that. I mean, maybe he's in the process of developing a bigger message. So we'll have to check in with that guy a little bit later. We'll see. All right. Last one. Let's see where this one goes.
You're the brand. You yourself are the brand that you're trying to build online. It's not about the content you're talking about. It's not about curating content. It's about you showing up as authentically as you possibly can, rocking some pink shades, a little happy bathing suit, and feeling confident and comfortable in that, and owning your statements, how you're showing up, what you're wearing, what you're doing, what you're saying to a T, all the time, unapologetically and authentically. That is what personal branding is. And on TikTok, on Instagram, on any platform, branding is the most important thing that you can do, because you can create more products. You can create more services. But if you do not have an audience and the influence on that audience, it doesn't matter what you create, they're not going to buy it. It doesn't matter how great your product is, they're not going to buy it. Owning a personal brand, having a personal brand, and showing up as authentically as you possibly can is the way that you're going to crush it in the online space. That's the reality. And so my personal brand does not speak to everyone, and that is okay, because my message is not for everyone. And the moment you try to appease everyone is the moment you pull in and attract no one. So the best thing you can do is own and understand that you are your own personal brand, and you're responsible for showing that online and being able to show up authentically if you're trying to build a business. If you're not, then do what the fuck you want, right?
I get vegan vibes from this lady. But anyways, go ahead. What do you think about her?
I actually mostly agree with what she's saying. I do think that everything doesn't have to be said on the internet for you to have a strong personal brand. When she was talking about it's like you're the brand, you just need to just show up. I think there are some things that you don't have to talk about online. You don't have to have a take on. You don't have to do everything in order to have a strong personal brand. But I do agree with mostly everything else that she said. It really is important because, again, when I pivoted, I still had people that were sending clients my way. Anytime I've ever had to pivot or whatever because of my brand and who I am, I think, and you probably experienced that as well. No matter what you do, because of who you are and your brand, your character speaks a certain way. So I think you can never go wrong with that. I think there's always going to be a benefit to building that personal brand. But I do think that it kind of seems like she was also alluding to, like, you are the brand. You don't have to necessarily have any kind of intention behind it. And I do think that, again, sometimes I don't have to have a take on everything online in the name of being authentic. And so, but everything else, I agree with her, with what she's saying.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit like she is kind of still trying to figure out her personal brand, like the hashtag guy before her. Mm-hmm. And, I understand what she's saying about showing up and being authentic and all this other stuff. And like, even if it means dressing how I'm dressing right now, it's like, all right, we get it. You're authentic. Yeah. Sometimes like people, here's the thing about the authentic thing.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Sometimes they can try to be so authentic that it comes off as unauthentic.
Yes.
Like their brand is this authenticity. And it's just like,
you're exaggerating a version of yourself in the being authentic.
You are a caricature of your authenticity.
You're a character that's an exaggerated version of that because you feel. That's what I got from her. It's more or less like, yes, that's true. Yes, you show up. Yes, you be authentic. But in a quest to being authentic, and that's how you're exactly right when you said she's trying to figure it out. Because when I was trying to figure it out, that was exactly what I did. Like, I was an exaggerated version of who I really am because I felt, okay, this is going to show me being my authentic self. But really, it was this exaggerated version of myself. And it really wasn't authentic still because I was trying too hard at that point to be authentic, therefore not being authentic. So that's what I got from her as well.
Yeah. No, for sure. I'm kind of like, she's so I think there's like we talked about like earlier, there's a balance, right? There's a balance between not doing it a little too hard, and you kind of turn people off on both ends, and then it's like there's no real truth in there,
anywhere, and not having any intention behind it, but just saying, just say the F word just because that's what you
exactly.
You're adding that in unnecessarily. Would you really say that in that context? If you're going to say it in the context you would actually say it if you were having a conversation.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
The first
Fatima, how can people contact you if they're interested in getting some coaching about their personal brand?
Yes, they can. Actually, on my Facebook profile under Fatima Asan Barnes, there is a link there as well as about the book, but my DMs are always open, or there is a link where you can book and get on my calendar for a call where we check and see if the vibe's right, if I'm a good fit for you, if you're a good fit for me, and determine if we're able to work together. Or they can visit www.ceocharmschool.com. It's working on a rebrand right now as I am pivoting and getting a new website, so I haven't been sending people there, but definitely social media is a great place for that.
Awesome, and I'll put those links in the description to this show. Fatima Barnes, thank you for your coming and teaching us with authentic personal branding is, giving us a roadmap on how we can get there, and generally being an awesome person that has made a significant change in how you kind of show up online. I think that's really important, and it's something that I endorse. So excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. So that is our interview about personal branding. For Fatima, I'm Micah. We're out of here. We'll see you later. Bye.